track and back at it again. Day 11? 11. Wow, not bad. So this morning I started doing this thing that's, I do a lot. It's kind of like a calming Zen thing for me. I just make lists. Not always like to-do lists or things that are necessarily all that important. I just start finding a topic and listing things. That's a little vague. Mostly what I do is movie stuff. By actor, by director, by cinematographer, whatever it is, I'll just pick a director, let's say, and then just write down every movie they made that I can remember, and then go to like IMDb and check to see how right I was and what. And I think I started doing this mostly because it calms me down. Not that I was riled up or anything, but mostly I think it was because I found this journal in my desk yesterday where I had been doing the exact same thing about 2 years ago, and it had a list of maybe about 40 or so directors and every movie they made, just page by page. And I remember thinking, like, why did you do this? I started to feel like I had failed myself because maybe I had set that up as a way to watch all these movies and to watch a full filmography of a director. And then I realized that no, it was the same reason I did it this morning, which was just to feel a little bit better. One of the other weird lists that I would make a lot had to do with Disneyland. I know what I do sometimes is I list out every land in Disneyland, and then I write down every ride and attraction that I can remember in that place, sometimes restaurants, and then I cross-reference the website and see if I was... It's just a really weird, nerdy thing, but it's a strategy that I think I never really labeled before as something to make me feel a little bit better, calm me down. Just a small work exercise that distracts me and keeps me going. I think if you follow another path of that, you get like those fidget spinners and fidget cubes. It's just something that you can do to keep your mind and maybe physical energy directed at something else for a short period of time. I've always found trash on the ground on these walks. It's always interesting to see what people are throwing out. I assume like out the window of their car or something. You get used to finding bottles, chip bags, I guess like 7-Eleven gas station items like that. But you don't expect to see as many prescription pill bottles as I do. The one that I've been finding more and more common recently is those little colored bottles that they put weed in at dispensaries. And it's weird because when I was a kid, that was such a taboo substance that when I saw anything related to it, it freaked me out. Like, I thought the cops would come and arrest me if I merely noticed a, like, t-shirt bundled up on the ground that had a weed leaf on it. And to have that prohibition and propaganda about how negative that stuff is drilled into my head at such a young age, it's really strange to know that there are stores where you can legally walk in, give them your cash, and receive that product back. When I spent majority of my life terrified that if my neighbor had some, that the whole complex would get arrested. I wasn't the most reasonable child with some of my fears. I find it kind of interesting that I've somehow automatically found a route on this walk. The first few days I would kind of spin off into different directions every time just to go exploring. But I found this path that gets me deeper down the neighborhood without having weird dead ends or leading to major streets where it gets too noisy to record. And because of that, I found myself admiring the things on that route more. Like this place over here. I would love to have a house one day that has a front yard that's completely walled off by trees, and kind of it's like you get your own personal forest, your own personal jungle. I also just really love big trees, ones that go just really high up. You could tell have missing branch, like someone saw me, and it is a little embarrassing. Not as much as it used to be, but it's a little embarrassing. So I walk by this house every day too, and I think it's kind of cool. I don't know if I could do it. I think it's cool. Their property is a lot bigger than this, but they turned their front yard into a horse stable, or I guess it's not a stable, it's not a full building. I don't know much about raising horses, so I don't know the terminology for it, but they like took out all the grass, it looks like, and built some fences and some track area, and they have horses living in the front yard. I think it's a cool use of the space, and I'm gonna I'm gonna miss this when I go back to work. I mean, like when I go back to school, so a normal work schedule again. I haven't decided if I'm gonna keep doing the walk videos or not during that time, but I can tell that I'm definitely gonna miss waking up whenever I want and then not working until, I don't know, 11, noon, 1. Like today I'm not working till 3, and it's great. And actually, I was really worried about how much money I was gonna be making during this break. And turns out, I'm making pretty much the same, if not more, than I am when I'm working at the school. Which makes me just want to do this full time. The problem with that is, the clients that I work with primarily will both have school when school starts again. In fact, 2 of them go to the school that I work at. So, schedule wouldn't be the same. But I've been doing it for a few years. I'm pretty used to it now, so I'll fall right back into the swing of it. But man, I gotta just embrace and enjoy this while I have it. Because it's nice. It really is. This walk and talk doesn't quite have a theme yet. What should I do about that? I think, wasn't it the other day I said I'd talk about positive Comic-Con experiences? And it's weird that Comic-Con only ended 2 days ago, less than 48 hours ago. And I already feel like, it's way in the past, who cares, right? So let's bookend it. Let's go ahead and talk about some of those positive stories that I have from cons past. It's weird, I said I would tell some positive stories and then I'm rattling my brain and I think of a couple, but I'm like, what are the good ones? I don't want to sit here and make this video hours long because I'm gonna go through every single cool time I've ever had at Comic-Con. And because of that, trying to narrow it down, I can't pick one. Give me a sec. I have one that was kind of cool, a little embarrassing too, but I was, I want to say 16 or 17, probably 17. Basically, I was on my way out of high school. And my plan at that point was to graduate, get into a film school. Within the first few days of film school, have them realize that I'm actually a genius and hand me the keys to the next big major studio franchise. I was gonna bring back Star Wars. I was gonna bring back Jurassic Park. I was gonna make an Avengers movie. And they did all those without me. Shit. Now, of course, that was just a kid's pipe dream at that point. I hadn't really thought too much about the hard work it would take and the craft I'd actually have to learn in order to ever do anything like that. Now, I haven't written off those ideas, but it's funny, the more I learned, the more I realized that I don't think I would be as interested in major studio filmmaking. Big budget blockbusters. I love watching, but I'm not 100% sure I'd like making them. I've always liked more intimate sets. I've been on set for both huge blockbusters and smaller indie stuff, including like down to like student films, of course. And I much preferred the atmosphere of the smaller sets, feeling like you're making a movie with your friends and not 1,000 other people. But I'm distracting myself here. The actual story is, it was just before I graduated high school, and I went to the convention probably more excited about my future than I think any other year. And that was also the time when it was a little bit easier to do the things at Comic-Con. There weren't huge lines for everything. Less than an hour tops for almost anything, especially like signings and stuff. And I remember I went to a signing for something that Broken Lizard had just put out. I want to say it was Beer Fest, but I'm not 100% sure. And I got to meet a few of those guys, which was really cool. And I ended up having a decent conversation with Jay Chandiskar. And he asked me how old I was because he thought it was kind of funny that I was knowledgeable about his movies being like such R-rated comedies and seeming a little bit younger. And also that I had a knowledge about some more classic movies that he was trying to like bring up to me. And I was like, yeah, I know that. And when he found out that I was in high school, he asked, so are you going to college? And I said, yeah, actually, I'm excited because I'm going to film school. And he said, do you know where yet? And I told him I'm looking at places in Vancouver, Canada and Toronto, Canada. And he's like, oh, Canada? Wow, that's quite a way away. And I remember being the naive kid that I was, assuming that everyone else was had traveled as little as I had. And when he asked me what school in Toronto I was looking at, I don't remember which one I told him. But he said, oh, that's a good school. And in my head, I'm like, well, I haven't traveled very many places, so clearly nobody else has. I asked him, well, have you ever been there? And he, instead of being a dick about it, he went, yes, I have. And it's a great school. And then started telling me about the school and about people he knows that works there. And it was really nice of him to take my arrogance and just turn it into a teaching moment for me when he really didn't have to. It was just a meet and greet, just a signing. And it was something I held on to for a while, that there was a humbleness to him and a humbleness to just people meeting their fans. And those were my favorite interactions. There was another one year where I remember I saw a signing happening somewhere in the middle of the floor for that movie version of The Mist. And I was excited about that movie because I knew it was being made by Frank Darabont, the guy who made The Green Mile and The Shawshank Redemption. 2 movies that appear on like every single list of the greatest movies ever made. So I see a signing that had Frank Darabont, Thomas Jane, who starred in the movie, and Greg Nicotero, who did the special effects, one of the most famous special effects makeup artists of all time. But I also remember seeing a huge line that wrapped all the way around this center booth like 2 or 3 times. And I remember thinking, oh man, that would have been so cool to go talk to them. But there's no way I can wait in this whole line. I circled the booth again just to kind of be that creepy dude that observes from a distance for a while because I was still kind of starstruck. And I realized by just following that line that it didn't lead to their booth. In fact, there was kind of nobody walking up to their booth. They all just seemed to be talking to each other sitting down. And I realized that line was to a signing at the next booth over for, I think, Veronica Mars. And I remember thinking, like, at the time I had never seen Veronica Mars. I still haven't. I know it has a lot of fans and it's pretty popular, but I didn't care about it. So I was like, how do they not know that one of the greatest filmmakers and the greatest special effects artists are just here willing to talk and nobody wants to talk to them? So I found my way through that crowd and went up to their booth and asked, is there a line for this, guys? I'd hate to cut in front of anybody. And they're like, no, come on up. And I got them to sign this poster, a little mini poster for The Mist. I don't know where it is. That's a big bummer to me that I lost that. But I ended up talking to them for a while, and I was talking to Frank Darabont about my love for movies, and he told me about some of his favorite movies and the kind of stuff he was doing and watching when he was growing up and first getting into it. And it was really inspiring, and Thomas Jane told me a lot of stuff about his love for cinema when he was younger and things that he was doing. And Greg Nicotero, the same way. I asked him about George Romero and what it was like kind of working under him and Tom Savini. And it was an amazing conversation, especially to someone who's really into film, especially for someone who's really into film and is just getting into making film. And with only 1 or 2 other people ever coming up to the booth to get autographs, I would come back up and continue our conversation with them. And I ended up talking with the 3 of them for probably 30, 40 minutes. It was awesome, especially for me. I was a kid, I was in high school, talking to the masters of the craft I wanted to find myself in. And I think their signing, the time allotment for their signing was just about up. And they started talking about how they had to wrap things up and then they were gonna go out somewhere downtown for lunch. And I guess just because they were feeling like nice people, Greg Nicotero invited me to come to lunch with them. And they were all okay with it. And I mean, if some of your heroes ask you to go to lunch with them, you say yes! And so I walked out of the convention center, down into the gas lamp, found a sandwich shop with them, and sat down for about another half hour and had lunch with the guy who made Shawshank Redemption, the guy who learned his craft on Dawn of the Dead, and an actor who had been in a few projects that I really liked and also had a ton of great stories to tell. And I know for some people that is just part of their life. I'm not saying a lot of people, I'm just saying like people maybe within the industry, you humanize the people who are stars to you or idols of yours really quickly. And during that interaction, it definitely did happen. Kind of just talking like friends after a while. But I never shook that starstruck feeling completely because I didn't feel like I was deserving of it yet, especially just because of my age. And they just took me in for an afternoon and were willing to talk to me like people, but also about their craft. I know sometimes people don't want to talk about business, don't want to talk about work all the time, but these guys were so happy to, so excited to, that it made me feel like one day this could be something that you love doing and not just a job. So after lunch, we parted ways, and that was fine. You know, they were really nice about it. But the next year after that, I happened to run into Frank Darabont at Comic-Con again, because he goes just as a fan sometimes. And of course, me, probably not having nearly as exciting of a life as he does, remember that interaction with him so well that I went up to say hi to him like we were old friends. And to my surprise, he remembered me and seemed at least happy to see me again, and asked me if I wanted to go to lunch again that year. So for 2 years in a row, I got to go to have lunch with Frank Darabont and have him tell me stories about the making of Green Mile and Shawshank, and talk about Stephen King, and talk about my love for The Mist. So I think that's why, no matter what happens in that man's career, he's gonna be one of my favorite filmmakers, because I have a really memorable personal story. I love you, Frank. And they done you dirty on The Walking Dead. So I have plenty more stories about Comic-Con. Those were just the first two that came to mind, ones that have sat with me for a while. Maybe I'll tell more later, who knows. But this walk, the video may not reflect it, but this walk has been one of the longer ones I've done in a while. The video on my phone taps out at about 30 minutes and then makes me start a new one. And that happened once, and it looks like I'm at another 22 minutes of recording, which means I've been out here for almost an hour. Feels good. I'm still in a good mood. So anyway, I guess I'll be back tomorrow with some more incoherent bullshit. See ya later. Whatever.